Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover the Saints. We'll cover a lot of Pelicans tonight. We got a great guest for you. His inaugural journey here on Inside New Orleans Sports, Christopher Dodson of Forbes. He joins us on the program now. He's been breaking a lot of stories with the Pelicans. He was the guy that broke the naming rights story for the Superdome. And we have him for the full hour tonight. Christopher, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us. We always like to start the show off kind of telling folks a little bit about you, your background, and who you're writing for. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, first, appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I come to New Orleans to write about the Pelicans from more of a politics background in North Louisiana. Did my college here in Louisiana, finished up at Northwestern State, and really just got into the Pelicans, started writing about them a little bit for a blog. Forbes picked me up. Forbes is one of the more respected names in reporting as it is, and I couldn't pass that up. So when they said, do you want to go to New Orleans and cover the Pelicans, I jumped right on it. Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, I'll tell you right now, and I've been breaking a lot of stories about what's going on with the Pelicans, and we're going to talk some Saints with him today as well. So let's get started. Before we get started, how can folks follow you on social media? How can they find all your articles? You can check out my archive on Forbes Sports. Go to the Sports Money section, click Christopher Dodson, you can find me. On Twitter, at Doing It Dodson, I'll release things there that maybe aren't article length worthy, or maybe some updates on the Zion lawsuit or the Superdome naming rights as that come about. So yeah, you can just follow me there on Twitter, and that's where I release most of my small tidbits.
Right. Podcast as well?
Yeah, we do the podcast called Protect the Nest. It was a live and local podcast in New Orleans, which that I did kind of got shut down with the coronavirus pandemic. But now we have on Delgado's coach, Coach Rory. We've had Fletcher Mackel on, had a few other people on that's trying to change up the way the podcast is kind of our approach because of the coronavirus, but still give the people more of a New Orleans seasoned podcast instead of just a straight-laced news reporting podcast.
Well, again, looking forward to having you on the program tonight. Pelicans finished the regular season 28-36 because of the way the NBA stacked them in terms of the standing. They are now 10th in the West. Portland is in front of them by a few percentage points because they played more games. First, let me ask you about that first, because a lot of people felt like, Pelicans didn't play their full season. Obviously, neither did the Trailblazers. The Pelicans had the hardest part of their season early. They were looking forward to the stretch run, having to play a lot of teams in the Western Conference and a lot of teams that they were going to have to compete for a playoff spot, but also, again, teams that you felt like they had a really chance of beating. And the teams from the East, they were hands down better than. They didn't play the same number of games as Portland. Obviously, they went with the number of games as the litmus test on where they were going to put these teams. And was it fair in your mind or unfair in your mind based on, again, what was left for the Pelicans, what was left for the other teams in contention?
It's fair considering that was the best of all the options. I mean, there was no great option except finishing the season, and that couldn't happen. Memphis got off really easy because Portland played most of their season without their full roster, the same as New Orleans didn't have Zion for most of their season. So, I mean, you had to find a way to give a challenge to the 9th and 10th place teams, Portland and New Orleans, while also giving somewhat of an advantage to Memphis because, I mean, they went through most of the season. They won the games. You have to give them credit. But in the end, New Orleans, it's not quite fair, but it's not out of reach that they could make a run.
Yes.
They can make the playoffs. Everything's still in front of them the way it was when the season was put on hiatus. So while it's fair, not maybe the fairest route, it provides a good challenge for judging the team, evaluating the team, and seeing how they develop.
Yep. Let's talk about the restart plan. You know, originally I've been hearing July 31st would be the start date. ESPN's reporting today it's going to be July the 30th. Let's talk about leading up to that. Training camp before playoffs, what will that look like?
Right now, you've still got one coach, one ball, one goal. The Pelicans, for the most part, all of them are in town and practicing by themselves. Hopefully, training camp can ramp up where you get 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and they'll get to play 5-on-5 before they go to Orlando, or the first week they're in Orlando for training camp, which would be the first part of July. I think the Pelicans are supposed to get there July 7th, 8th, or 9th. They're staggering how the teams arrive in Orlando. But once they're there, training camp should look a lot like training camp in the regular preseason. Maybe some inter-squad scrimmages, maybe a scrimmage against one of the other teams in the Eastern Conference that they don't play for the play-in seeding games. And from there, you should be able to judge if the team's ready, if it's going to be a rusty product or a very well-polished product on the court once the games really do matter again.
Any type of talk about the games leading up. Was it the 8 games or so that are going to be played? Is that only the teams that are all doing the play-in, or is that the entire 16 teams, really 22 teams that will be in Orlando? Will they all be playing games, getting ready, or is it simply just the teams that are trying to play into that 8th seed?
Now, all 22 teams invited to Orlando will play an 8-game seeding schedule, so to speak. They're between the 2nd seed and the 7th seed in the West. Everybody could change positions in 8 games. So everyone will play, everybody will get a chance to play themselves in the form, play themselves into a better playoff position because they won't have home court advantage. It'll be more trying to play for a series and picking your matchup, so to speak. But no, every team in Orlando will play an 8-game set of games.
How is the schedule going to be determined? Obviously, I would think the teams that are vying for the 8th seed will play a lot of games amongst themselves, but why don't you explain it to the audience?
You would hope so, but as it is, they're going to pick up where the season left off. And so you're just going to play your schedule from there forward.
So wherever the Pelicans were in Sacramento that night, they pick up with Sacramento.
Correct.
And those are the teams they play all the way through.
All the way through, unless they would come up on a game like, say, against the Warriors.
Right.
The Warriors aren't there, so they would just skip to the next game. And that has caused a little bit of scheduling conflict because that would give some teams 7 and 9 games. So they're going to play with a couple teams on the end, but that should not affect the Pelicans at all. I think it'll change the Lakers schedule and the Orlando Magic schedule.
Okay, and that's interesting because, again, Pelicans down the stretch had one of the easiest, if not the easiest schedule in the NBA. Now, we don't know how that's going to change now with teams getting healthy, but at the same time, at least on paper, they had the easiest schedule down the stretch.
Correct, and they still got one of the easier schedules in Orlando. It's sad that they miss out on those last few games against San Antonio. They were going to play San Antonio twice in the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
Now San Antonio doesn't have LaMarcus Aldridge, but the Pelicans won't get to make those games up on the schedule. They'll still have to play a healthy Portland, a healthy Washington Wizards who will be playing for their playoff lives.
True.
So they miss out on a few easy games and they replace them with playoff games.
Right. Let me see if I got this right. New Orleans, Portland, San Antonio, Sacramento, Phoenix, Washington, Orlando, Memphis, the playing teams, is that right?
Correct. And Memphis is only a playing team in that they hold the AC. Everybody under them is playing for their spot.
For that spot,
Yep.
right. And in the East, it's just Washington, right, and Orlando?
Just Washington and Orlando. They're the ones battling for that A seed, and Washington is 5.5 games out. So unless they can make up a couple of games, the Eastern Conference is already set.
Talk about the seeding as it is. You mentioned a little bit a few minutes ago. The seeding can now change with the games that are going to be played, the 8 games leading up to the playoffs. When you talk about each conference, who we see now could definitely change in terms of matchups down the line, 2, 3, 4, all the way down the line.
Correct. I think you'll see the Lakers hold on to the number 1 seed. Dallas could maybe potentially creep up into the 5 or 6 seed, but the 4th through 6 seeds are all so close together. They just one game against each other will flip who's playing who. And right now I think a lot of people are trying to avoid the Clippers.
Yes.
And we don't know if the Clippers are going to be the 2, 3, or 4 seed. So that's going to kind of play with the last week of, I guess, playing games in Orlando. You might see some rest. You might see some other teams, taking a night off.
Sure. With that said, and I looked at the standings today, and just for the life of me, Dallas was fairly close to Memphis. But Dallas is in, right? So it doesn't matter if Dallas again loses games here. They're one of those seeds that are in. It's really playing for that last 8th seed, right?
Correct. To my understanding, they could fall to the 8th spot if they lost all 8 games.
Okay.
The likelihood of that happening,
sure,
is, what can you do? But they've got a 90-something% chance of being in the playoffs. So we just consider them in at this point.
Right. When you look at the one thing I think people are worried about more than anything else is ragged basketball. Guys that have not been able to practice or play for a long period of time, and getting in NBA shape. And when you're in NBA shape, you're not in NBA shape now. It really takes a little bit more time than 8 games to get in NBA shape. What kind of basketball do you think we're going to see in those 8-game play-ins?
Well, you got 6 weeks of build-up time, so hopefully the players can knock some rust off.
Okay.
But you look at, say, Zion Williamson. The team was worried about his fitness before he even got injured. Now he's coming off an injury. Now he's coming off a layoff.
Right.
That's something to worry about. But then you look at Nicolo Melli. He lives in the CBD. He doesn't have a goal at his house. At his apartment, he literally can't be in basketball shape because he can't shoot a basketball. So that's going to be tougher. Some players have, they've got their own gyms. LeBron has his own facility.
Right.
I think LeBron's probably got better facilities than some colleges in Louisiana.
Right.
But the way it is, you're going to have a bunch of players who are ready and a bunch of players who, they still got 40 or 50 on a conference call saying, we might not want to play for safety reasons. I doubt those 40 to 50 players are out doing 2-a-days getting ready for training camp.
Right. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. There are players out there that do not want to participate in this. They're worried about coronavirus, whatever it is at that point. I don't know how that works with a team when you're saying, you're part of a team and then you don't want to go to Orlando to be involved in this. But how much do you think that would affect a team, and do we have a clear picture of who those players could be that ultimately will not or do not want to travel to Orlando to be in the bubble city to participate in the postseason?
We know who some of those players are. Damian Lillard, for one, has been outspoken about how if he didn't have a chance at a playoff series, he didn't want to play.
Right. But he has a chance now.
He has a chance, but some others, we know some of the more the foreign players have expressed some concerns. There have been players without putting their family history out there. They have children with pre-existing conditions that might want to go to Disney World. They're going to cry that daddy's at Disney World for 3.5 months.
Right.
But they can't really be in the bubble because they are a higher risk.
Yes.
Same with some of the coaches, same with, I guess, some of the players' parents. The players' parents like to watch their sons play.
Sure.
But they won't be allowed in the bubble without a lot of safety precautions and a lot of risk.
Right. Interesting, again, and of course the bubble city is Orlando. Wide World of Sports is going to be the venue in which the games will be played. 1,600 max people on campus at any one time for the NBA. That means, again, a lot of teams may have to cut their staff some, right?
Correct. I'm hearing that there will be bare bones training staff once training camp is complete. You won't have every coach in the gym with every player like they can do here in New Orleans. There's talking about coaching staffs being bare bones on the bench, perhaps just a head coach and one other clipboard coach and everyone else being more like a coordinator in the football, setup. They would be up in the booth,
yes,
doing what they can from there. But for the most part, you're only going to bring who you need to Orlando. You don't need that many ball boys.
Man, that's interesting though. For a game like basketball that is so hands-on, coaches instructing from the court, sitting down when a guy comes over, and either charting something out or speaking to someone. That's a whole different animal for the NBA now if you're going to have coaches that are in the booth.
Right, and just keep the players engaged. Look at the end of the bench during most NBA games. We've seen LeBron flipping water bottles at the end of the bench.
Right.
How can you keep those players engaged if they're not going to play in that game? They don't have coaches on the bench maybe helping their development, say Nikhil Alexander-Walker, getting in Chris Finch's ear and asking him why a play's developing the way it is. The players lose out on that developmental time even while the game's going on. If they're not playing, they can still ask questions.
Sure.
The coaches won't be there to even ask questions at this point.
That's going to be another question that was brought up when, again, the thought was coming back, going to a bubble city, was coaches or team personnel that were over 60. That affects the New Orleans Pelicans with Alvin Gentry. And the possibility of them, being maybe more at risk for COVID-19. How do you think that plays out? And will Alvin Gentry be on the bench for the Pelicans?
We don't know, actually. Right now, we're not sure what that protocol will look like for the coaches. But you got Alvin Gentry's above the age that for the protocols.
Right.
Jeff Bezdelic is also above that. So you're looking at maybe Chris Finch, and that's it as far as actual, Fred Vinson's a shooting coach, but how much can he really help Finch design plays on the bench in the heat of the moment? Maybe he's not ready for that as a coaching development.
Right.
That's another thing. This is going to hurt coaching development in that they won't be as hands-on.
Right.
They'll have to learn different ways to teach the game. And we don't know where that's going to take us, but we do know it's going to maybe affect the product a little bit, and we just hope it's not so much that it's bad basketball we're watching.
Yeah, and then the other part of it, you mentioned right now what's going on across the NBA. One coach, one ball, one player, gloves on the coach. I wonder if we'll see coaches masked up, especially older coaches on the sidelines during the games, as far as that goes. I mean, that's an unknown yet, but I wonder if that's a part of this.
Right, that's been floated that all the coaches, I think Alvin Gentry come out and even told ESPN, if I have to wear a mask, all the coaches should have to wear a mask.
Yes.
But Gentry said he should be allowed to coach, especially since it's his prerogative, it's his choice. He would want to do that. But we don't know what that final protocol is going to look like yet.
Yeah, they're still kind of working that out. Families will be able to come to the bubble city, from what I understand. They can come after the first round, which is the play-in games, and then they're supposed to have only 3 people. There will be some exceptions. There's a proposed 35-person travel limit for the teams as well. So. That was part of the deal that we were hearing, right? Las Vegas, Orlando, players didn't want to be away from their families for 3 months. They wanted the ability to bring their families there. We know that, again, the players will be able to play golf. They'll be able to go to restaurants within the bubble city, which, again, would be within Disney World. But if you got your family there with kids, they're going to want to be at Disney World, right? They're going to want to be able to take advantage of Disney World when it opens. And we're talking about July, so you got to figure Disney World is going to be open. What's the possibility of them coming in contact, or again, whoever the guardian or the other parent is with them, and then bringing that back to the hotel room, and then you're worried about the players. It's going to be very, very hard to quarantine players if the family's there, but what choice does the NBA have?
Right, they've put some protocols in place where, say, if the family wants to go to Disney World, that's fine, but they'll also have to quarantine for 10 days after they go visit all the rides.
Right.
So that's another tough piece of logistics.
How can you tell your son or your daughter that they just went to Disney World, they got to sit in a hotel room for 10 days?
Right. They're going to want to go back.
Come on.
The next day. I didn't get to go to this ride. Let me go do this. But that's just part of this new normal we're living in. The players, they'll have the option of bringing their family in. The family will have the option to Disney World, but it'll come, like everything during coronavirus right now, your actions will come with consequences.
Yes. The testing is going to be interesting because, from what I understand, they'll be testing nightly. They're not going to use the nasal test, in which we see a lot of people having here. We've seen them in New Orleans. We've just seen the advent of the mouth swabs, just recently here in the city. They're going to use the mouth swabs in the NBA, from what I understand. Not sure again how accurate those are, but obviously they've gotten with a company that can give them the testing kits and the ability to be able to go ahead and test those swabs when they're done. But this is going to happen again nightly. And from what I understand, the last thing, and maybe you'll correct me here, a player is going to be quarantined for 10 days if ultimately they're found to be positive, but they don't have to leave. No, it's a 7-day quarantine. They don't have to leave the facility. They can stay in the bubble city.
Correct. To my knowledge, that is what they're going to do. They keep playing with the 7 to 10 days, but if a player tests positive and their team is still in it, they'll be allowed to stick around and hopefully rejoin the team, say if they win a series or advance to the playoffs. Right.
That's going to be interesting because, man, if you get 1 or 2 or 3 players, that could change the balance of power in the playoffs if they test positive. Now, I know there's a league, and I think it's a German soccer league right now, that if a player's testing positive, they're going with it right now. They're allowing the player, not quarantine the player, they're allowing them to play through it. Obviously, that's not going to happen with the NBA. Also, no drug testing for anybody once the season resumes in Orlando. So that's part of the deal coming back here, with again players being off it as long as they have. Talk about practice. What will practice look like in Orlando for an NBA team?
Hopefully, once you get to Orlando, the practices will look pretty much like normal regular season practices once you've had a couple of days off. You know, during the regular season, if you're playing every other day, you don't really practice that much. So once you get to Orlando this time, you're going to have to ramp it up a little bit, get players' legs underneath them, get players back in the rhythm and the flow of just playing basketball, because that's the only way to get in basketball shape is play basketball.
Absolutely.
And once you get there in Orlando, I think you'll see some intense practices leading up to the first few games in the last week of July. But once you get into those 8 games, the play-in teams are going to know within the first 4 games if they've still got a shot or not.
Yeah.
Practices after that will be dependent on your position. Same for maybe take the Lakers and the Clippers. Maybe they take a little longer to ramp up the intensity of practice because they know they're guaranteed a first-round series. Those first 8 games can be used as an extended preseason instead of like the Pelicans will be. They'll be playing for their playoff live.
Yes.
They've got to pick up the intensity well before that first game happens.
Right. Back-to-backs. It's been a big issue with the NBA in the regular season. They've tried to stagger the playoffs over the last few years to eliminate that. You're in a condensed situation now. What will Orlando look like in terms of back-to-backs?
You'll have a lot of them. We did over at Forbes, if y'all want to check out the article, just mapping out the season, where if you had the group stage or a 22-team, format.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
If you had that format, you could play about 80, 85 games in the median of the games to be expected to be played. You don't expect all the series to be a sweep or go 7 games. So 80, 85 games. If you play back-to-back, you can finish the season in September. The NBA has decided to give a few days, break in the 8 games seeded and then the end of the playoffs. Like, say you get to the finals, you won't play back-to-back. That's why they're pushing the projected target date right now is October 13th, because you'll have a couple of days between games once you get to the quarterfinals, semifinals, conference finals, NBA finals.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, there's a lot of talk about maybe pumping NBA 2K noise in there to the games. I can understand on one hand why they would want to do it. Look, I've sat courtside covering the team before. You've done the same. It's a whole different vibe when you're down low, what you can hear and what you can't hear, vulgarity, etc. It's been a long time since an NBA game where you could actually hear sneakers squeaking on a gym floor. But, to me, I would prefer that rather than having to pump in noise. What do you stand on that?
I'm with you on that. I think you learn a lot more just hearing the flow of the game.
Yes.
I come from a soccer background.
Okay.
And all the soccer leagues playing without fans right now. You can actually hear the coaches yelling and dictating forms, and those sorts of tactics in a soccer game for a 45-minute half is wonderful to hear. Same for the UFC. I don't know if you watched the fights recently, but it was amazing to hear the coaches' corners yelling out direction to the fighters and being able to hear the actual impact of every shot. If you watch the UFC normally, you hear all the screaming.
Right.
The last few weeks, you've been able to hear the thump when you hit a good body shot and the differences. The same could be done for basketball. You're going to hear more of the coaches and the players yelling, maybe they have to go to a 3-second delay because there's plenty of vulgarities. Every
Yes,
time Carmelo
sure.
grabs a rebound,
Right.
he's cussing at somebody
Yes.
saying it's his. But hearing that part of the game, let's go college football when they do the megacast.
Right.
People go to the channel without fans or announcers and they just want to hear the game, the sounds of the game.
Yes.
So if they can't just do that, maybe we have that option.
Right.
NBA TV has sounds of the game, and ESPN or
Right.
TNT has the actual broadcast
Right.
with piped-in music.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I prefer to hear the natural.
Me too. I would too.
Organic.
When I heard that, I was like, oh, I really hope they don't do that. I mean, again, it's been a long time since you've heard sneakers squeaking on a court, but I want to hear what's going on in terms of the game. Look, one of the things we heard about the Pelicans all season long is they're not a talking team, right? I mean, you'll hear that firsthand. A lot of people who sit courtside, they know that, they hear that, or they don't hear them speaking.
They don't,
Yeah, so we'll have a chance to be able to hear that. I hope they do not pump in the crowd noise. Let's talk about what's going to happen going forward. Again, we know that the start date, they said today, at least ESPN is reporting July the 30th. October 12th was supposed to be the end date. It may be October 13th now. And then you're looking at the draft lottery, which is going to be on August the 25th. The draft will be on October the 15th. And my question to you is, because it's such a late draft, do you think October 15th, you're thinking about that's when college basketball normally opens up their practices. That's the date that, we see midnight madness in a lot of cases. How do you think that affects the underclassmen who want to be able to enter the draft and that may want to go back to college, for their senior, junior, sophomore season? It'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, because then you got a tight squeeze. I think now you'll probably be in a situation where you really have to listen to the advice of the board that kind of tells you a little bit about, that does the scouting for you, looks at the combines and says, will they believe you're NBA ready or not? And a lot of players are going to be squeezed in here to probably figure out, do I want to go back to school for another year and get back to a sense of normalcy? Or again, do I still give this a shot and maybe end up in the G League?
Right, and it's going to be tough for players because there may not be a combine.
Right.
They're going to be squeezed more into regional scouting, I guess, combines, sort of like the NFL does for D2 products and regional products. But right now, you just got to go what's on tape. And if what's on tape from last college season isn't good, you probably got to go back to college.
Right.
I mean, or take a G League option or a Euro option, which I think you'll see some players are going to fall off academically, and they're going to have to leave school, not go to the draft, but take their chances in Europe.
Yep.
Kind of like a Darius Miller route.
Right.
And that's just the nature of the beast. That's the times we're living in.
Might be really good news for LSU, considering the players that they have that are at least taking a look-see at the NBA. Now, again, the rule is as long as you don't have an agent, you have the ability to be able to go back to school. It'll be interesting to see again if that changes one way or the other, because we're again in uncertain times here as far as that goes. Free agency will start October the 18th. So you got free agency and then training camp November the 10th. NBA season looks like will start December 1st. That's exhibition games, right?
Correct. That'll just be exhibition games, preseason games. I think those timelines are still tentative because they usually have a few exhibition games against foreign leagues or a national team. We've seen that at the Summer League this year. They're still wanting to do that, according to all my sources with the NBA and the team with the Pelicans, but they don't know how that's going to happen. And until you get through Orlando and see if there's a second spike, if you can really continue with this season and go into the next season, that's going to remain tentative. Those dates are going to kind of be written in sand until we get right.
No doubt. All right, I'll tell you what, we'll take a break here. We'll hear from our underwriters, and then when we come back, we're jumping into Pelicans. We'll talk about what the Pelicans may look like going into this second season. We'll get into that. A little bit later on, we'll get into some New Orleans Saints for you. And then, of course, your phone calls are also welcome as well. Christopher Dodson of Forbes is with us tonight. I'm your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Christopher Dodson of Forbes is with us. He covers the Pelicans for Forbes. We'll also talk some Saints with him a little bit later on. He's also the gentleman that broke the story about the Superdome naming rights as well. We have a chance, we'll touch on that also. 17-man roster, which includes the two-way players that are on the roster. I looked it up this today. They have 17 players on their roster. You know, that when I heard the 17-player limit, the first thing I thought was Didi Lozada, who played in Australia this year, who had a really good season there. Is he going to be eligible? Is it only the players that are on the roster now? Explain how this works going into the second season.
All right, looking at your 17-man roster, the Pelicans already have 15 plus their two-way players with Zylan Cheatham and Josh Gray. So they're at their 17-man max now. Some NBA teams could sign a couple players for their two-way contracts. But the way it is, Didi won't be eligible, the same way J.R. Smith would not be eligible. In order to be eligible to be signed by an NBA team to play in Orlando, you had to have been on a roster this season. So DeMarcus Cousins was on the Lakers roster. He's been rehabbing. He's eligible to sign because he was on a roster this season. But say J.R. Smith, who's been waiting to sign all year, as soon as the coronavirus hiatus hit, and now with these new rules on signing players for Orlando, J.R. Smith's season is done. He's not an option. Didi Silva's not an option. No EuroLeague players who are done with their season that are free agents can be signed by NBA teams to play in Orlando. You had to have been on a roster this season to play in Orlando.
Well, again, I brought up Didi for a reason. He had such a great season in Australia. And a lot of people don't realize that's another piece that's coming to this team that's going to be on this team next season. You did a piece on him recently. Talk a bit about what he did in Australia.
Yeah, he had a great season in Australia and really shined when compared to, say, a LaMelo Ball and the other rising stars in the NBL. But as far as value to the Pelicans, I wrote a piece saying he would be the most valuable draft pick after Zion Williamson this year, mainly because he didn't cost the team anything this year on the salary cap. Going forward, he's just now starting his salary and wage process going 4 or 5 years. But also, he might make Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Frank Jackson, those sorts of players expendable so that the opportunity cost for the Pelicans can be used somewhere else, and they can go with Didi, who is just as young as Frank Jackson, as Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was a 4-year player. Didi Silva is going to be ready to step into a role much the same way David Griffith thought Nickeil Alexander-Walker was going to demand minutes this season. They've got that same problem next season with Didi Silva. And it'll be interesting to see how that depth chart plays out, who's maybe surplus to requirements, and how the front office deals with having such, I guess, tremendous value and depth of draft picks going forward, because they can't keep them all. And Didi Silva is just the first in those draft picks to come that they're going to have to replace some of the players on the roster now.
Well, I've said it all along. The one thing that David Griffin did when he got here, he started acquiring assets. And a lot of people don't realize, again, all those second-round picks that they've acquired, those are assets. You know, some again, the pick swaps, what they've got there, depending on where the Lakers are and where they are, you know, when these picks start to come to fruition for the Anthony Davis deal, those are all the ability to utilize those to be able to package, to get a player, to move those, to be able to get other picks. So again, they're all assets that down the line Griffin can use to be able to upgrade this team.
Right, and look at just the value of a second-round pick that hasn't been made. If the Pelicans want to flirt with the luxury tax, in the NBA you can sell second-round draft picks, and they go up to $3 million. So we have 10 or 12 going into the next 6 seasons. If you sold every one of those, Mama Gail Benson can pay a lot of luxury tax dollars to keep maybe a Derek Favors or bring in someone like a Bradley Beal with a trade that takes them over the luxury tax line. They've got so many second-round draft picks. You can maybe to get too speculative, you could say we got $18 million in free second-round draft picks in the next 5 years.
Yeah, a lot of people downplayed the second-round picks, but again, as I kept saying on the radio show, you know what? These are valuable. In the NBA, you may not say, well, second-round picks don't make it. Well, a lot of them don't, but there's still a value to that pick. And you just talked about, again, some of the ways you can utilize those picks as well.
If you look at the 2005 draft, I think 12 of the top 20 players for the advanced stat VORP, they were all second-round picks. After Chris Paul and a couple other of the top picks, just go back. I mean, that Chris Paul draft changed the city, and that Atlanta let Chris Paul drop.
Yes.
Because they had second-round picks. Now we're looking at that draft. You got more value out of more of the second-round picks than most of the first-round picks. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out going forward. Before I talk about the Pelicans roster, let's talk about players around the NBA who were injured, who may have a chance to come back and play in the playoffs. You know, I keep hearing the name Kevin Durant. Been about a year or so now, for him to heal. Is he NBA ready? Is he ready to play? How much does that change the balance of power in the East? Are there some players out there that could come back from injury that could change the balance of power in either the West or the East?
Well, you hear Kevin Durant's name tossed around, but he's come out, him and Kyrie, that says they're pretty much done for the season. The injured players that could most affect the NBA playoff race and the Pelican season is in Portland. They're getting Nurkic back. They're getting most of their frontline players back. John Collins, I mean, they're going to be stacked.
Yes.
And with the roster that got them to the Western Conference Finals last year. This year, they haven't had that roster play 1 minute together. They're going to come together for the first time in Orlando. And Portland's got us by 1 percentage point in the winning-loss percentage.
Right.
Beating them at least once when we play them will be paramount to jumping them in the standings, because they're going to have the most incoming firepower coming back to their team that has sat out the first 50, 60 games of the season.
And the Pelicans swept the Blazers during the regular season, but again, it doesn't matter up at this point because they have the lead on them. Speaking of getting healthy, Pelicans getting healthy too now. You look down the stretch, Derek Favors is still trying to round himself into shape. J.J. Redick was injured. Zion was still on a minutes restriction. Zion has been in the building working out throughout the coronavirus. So again, that's good news there. But Derek Favors is a guy now that should be completely healthy coming back, as J.J. Redick should be. What about a guy like Darius Miller also? I mean, is he a guy that the injury will keep him out the full calendar year? Or is that a possibility that maybe he has a chance to come in and be a sharpshooter? But, the Pelicans will be healthy as well as they go into this.
Right. Kenrich Williams and Zion both had waivers from the NBA to finish their rehab process down at the practice facility. You've got Derek Favors, who had a quad injury, and JJ had a thigh injury, and those are just lower leg injuries that over the course of a season you take your bumps, your bruises, you land wrong, it happens. They'll all be fresh. But looking at a Darius Miller, he's rehabbing. We don't know if he's going to be ready to jump in. We don't know if the team wants him to jump in. It might not be smart for him to jump in because people have seen what Darius Miller can do.
Yes.
And if he had a terrible 8 games in Orlando, he would cost himself millions.
Oh, yes.
Where his $7 million contract option for next year isn't guaranteed, it would be all but the veteran minimum should he come out and just have a stinker of a week or two.
It's interesting because, again, one of the reasons why Griffin signed him to the deal he signed him with was, again, another asset, an ability to be able to move him possibly during the middle of the season to be able to collect other assets. Of course, his injury really kind of put that on the shelf. To me, the biggest issue for this team is to recapture the chemistry they had down the stretch. And when Zion came back, it became a different team. They started playing together. I mean, I could remember being on this show. It seems like forever ago, lamenting the three-point shot constantly, the playground type ball, not playing as a team. This team really started to round into playing like a team down the stretch here. How quickly do you think they can bring that chemistry back, or do you think that's possible?
Well, that's the biggest challenge for Alvin Gentry. He's had plenty of critics come out and say he started the season too slow. It took him too long to find a rotation. He was going 13-man rotations into December. He can't do that in Orlando. This team has to hit the ground running.
Yes.
And so that's the biggest challenge for Alvin Gentry, and if he does well, I think it'll cool the seat a little bit. And if the Pelicans go 2-6 and they never sell on a rotation, that'll just heat up the hot seat more for Alvin Gentry.
Yeah. What do you expect? Do you expect the Pelicans to go into this thing to win enough games to overtake Memphis for the 8th seed? Is this just a situation where they're going to get a nice little run here and be preparing for next season? What are your thoughts are going to happen once they kick it off in Orlando?
I think the Pelicans have the possibility. I mean, they could go 6-2 and even jump Memphis, where they've only got to win one of the playoff games. That's definitely a possibility.
Yes.
It's not out of the realm of reason. More than likely, they go 5-3. They've got to play Memphis or possibly even Portland if Memphis fell off. But catching Portland is actually more important than catching Memphis. As long as we can win one more game than Portland, the Pelicans have had a successful run in Orlando, because they'll get into a playoff game type of situation with Memphis. And even if they lose, that gives you at least one data point on the pressure and burden of a playoff and how this roster can respond to that, instead of not getting that at all.
Yes. Talk about what has to happen for the Pelicans to get in. What does the play-in games look like? And then what would they have to do to get into that playoffs?
The playoff game would be just blood, claw, just tooth, whatever you can to fight it out. And look at the Pelicans. We beat Memphis every time, even when we didn't have Zion.
True.
I think we could just brute force, bully ball Memphis into a loss to knock them out of the playoffs. If we had to play Portland, though, that's a bit more of a finesse game. They would have the best player in that series in Damian Lillard. The Pelicans would have the best player if we had to play Memphis. So, I mean, going from there, it's going to be tough. It's going to be fun to watch.
Right.
We want to see it. But to know what's really coming, you would have to know what's going on in the building, and that you just can't get in there.
Right. The play-in game, it's a 2-game series, right? Pelicans would have to beat the 8th seed twice in order to overtake the 8th seed. Is that
Correct.
the way it is?
Correct.
So again, that'll be interesting to see as far as that goes. Also, the two-way players. We mentioned a little bit earlier. 17 players. One of the reasons why you have 17 players is in case teams have players that start to test positive. Then you're looking at Josh Gray, Zylan Cheatham. I was wondering about Kavell Bigby Williams, but again, he's not. He wasn't a two-way player. He was on the G League team.
Correct. Yeah, the G League players are all off the market now for NBA teams in Orlando. The G League season has been canceled. I know the Pelicans want to get those players some more developmental time, especially with the G League season being canceled. We don't know when they're going to move that team from Erie to Birmingham.
Right.
And we don't know how to fill out that roster. So they want to bring some of those players in, like Bixby Williams, see what they can do, and if maybe they can't join the roster. Obviously, they can't join the roster, but they could help in full-scale practices, maybe running an extra full team of 5-on-5 with a couple of trainers and G League players, just to keep everybody in shape, just to keep everybody on their toes.
Let's shift gears for a moment, and since we've talked about the Pelicans, I want to talk about Zion and this lawsuit, because some people are paying attention to it, some are not. Some are saying it doesn't really matter because Zion is a pro and whatever's going to happen there is going to happen. It's not going to affect him going forward, so it's nothing to pay attention to. Some people are paying very, very strong attention to this because it's a blue blood now that's in the crosshairs of what's going on now and the possibility of exposing, again, cheating at Duke University. We've seen the situation, the LSU and Will Wade being accused of being involved in that. We've seen Arizona. Duke has been pretty much, even though there's been rumors out there forever, they've been considered squeaky clean. Talk a little bit about what's going on between Gina Ford, the former marketing manager, and Zion.
Well, looking at the Zion Williamson lawsuit, you're definitely correct. People are starting to pay attention to this a lot more. When this lawsuit was first filed a year ago, you had me and Michael McCann, and that was it. Nobody else was following it.
Right.
Now there are 3 different lawyers from The Athletic that are reporting on it. A few different people just from the North Carolina courts, because it's Duke. It's going to get a lot of national traction and a lot of regional attraction. But it's a breach of contract argument that is now dragging his recruitment into it. It's dragging Duke into it. Gina Ford has reached the point in her motions where the judges are about to tell her, show your hand. You have to show that you can win this on the merits, or it's a possibility the case is dismissed and she loses out on a settlement. The $100 million she was originally seeking, she could lose everything if she keeps pressing the Duke angle and the recruitment angle.
Yes.
And just fails to show anything. I think in her newest motion, she cited Wikipedia and Zillow and Trulia.
Right.
And that's not going to fly for very much longer as far as settlement talks or getting the courts to take you seriously.
She's suing for $100 million, but now she's starting to talk about possibly gifts that the Williamson family got, including, again, $895 a month rent when they were in South Carolina, up to almost $5,000 a month rent when they moved to Duke and North Carolina. What are some of the other things that she's trying to drag into this lawsuit, and that, again, affects Duke more than it really affects Zion?
Right. Zion's a professional now.
Right.
The most that Zion would have to give up is his college career. He could say he didn't have any wins. Duke would have to forfeit wins.
Yes.
He's not going to have to give any of his professional money back to Duke. It would be to Gina Ford in an eventual settlement. But looking at the houses that, there are pictures of the houses being released. It's on Twitter. The evidence about cars. Gina Ford has brought up consulting fees paid to Zion Williamson's mother, jobs, counseling fees at Duke. Michael Avignetti was in the scheme talking about Zion getting paid.
Yes.
They've tried to introduce some of those text messages that was in the court case in the Southern District of New York, and that court decided they were inadmissible.
Yes.
Gina Ford's trying to enter those into evidence in North Carolina and Florida. Even though those are unauthenticated text messages, she wants them entered. But when they counter with, well, what about your text messages to Zion? She says, oh, well, those aren't authenticated.
Yes.
You can't use those against me, but I can use these against Zion.
Is there a paper trail other than, the Williamson family moving into a much more lucrative place in North Carolina as opposed to what they were living in when they were in South Carolina? Is there a paper trail of money that was exchanged between the Fords and the Williamsons?
Gina Ford alleges in her motions that she has a paper trail showing she paid $100,000 to Zion Williamson's stepfather.
Okay.
And that payment was made I believe within a week of Zion signing the original contract. To most people, that looks kind of bad. You sign the contract, we sent money to the stepdad. That's going to hurt. And it's going to hurt more if she actually does have the paper trail and it's not just baseless allegations being thrown out in court.
Yes. When all this first surfaced, the first thing I thought about was, okay, this is a marketing contract. He is supposed to be an amateur. How does an amateur sign a marketing contract?
To take her argument, he was not an amateur because he'd given up his eligibility.
Okay.
To take a different argument, you can look at the Pelicans for a different example.
Right.
You've got Josh Hart. He's got representation through CAA and stuff for his NBA deals, but he's also got the cut and sew marketing deal that helps him with his gaming applications, his other So Gina Ford could make the case that Zion could sign his own rookie deal as an NBA rookie. Everybody knows those are scale contracts.
Yes, they are.
She just wanted to do the Mountain Dew and the Puma agreements, negotiations.
Yes.
So as an amateur, he could sign that. I mean, nobody's stopping any college player, especially once they get the names and likeness rights in, to sign that while they're in school. But if Zion was leaving school, there's nothing there to stop him
But
from
if
signing
he
that.
still is at school, how can he sign a contract and actually take any type of monetary inducements for that? A lot of even if it flow through the family, and that's the big question here. Do you lose your amateur status at that point? It's interesting to see again how that kind of plays out because the NCAA has had this line you can't cross in terms of amateurism, and again if you're paid for your services, I mean they got upset with Dale Brown back when again he was buying meals for players, when he was flying his team up to see a cancer-ridden teammate, okay, and was upset with him there, saying that was a monetary inducement that was coming from the coach. So again, that'll be interesting again how that kind of plays out, not from the court standpoint, but from what the NCAA sees, and will they again ultimately look at Duke and say that there's going to be a flag on Duke, there's going to be some type of sanctions on Duke.
Well, the Duke and the NCAA both put forth and did some investigations to make sure Zion was eligible, and they both come back clean and they let him play.
Right.
This lawsuit is bringing up a lot of dirt, a lot of the dirty money that's in college basketball, and it's going to bring a bit of scrutiny onto the NCAA and Duke's investigations to see if they just looked where they wanted to see, or if they really did look under the rug and see what was there.
Right. And again, for the audience out there, this has zero to do with Zion with the New Orleans Pelicans. This has everything to do now really with Duke. And again, the possibility of maybe sanctions being put on Duke down the line. Let's go to the phone. Let's grab a couple calls here. Again, we have Christopher Dodson of Forbes as our guest tonight, and let's head to Toby in Gretna. He's up first tonight. Toby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric.
Toby.
Are any companies interested in dome naming rights? And I'll hang up. Thank you.
Thanks. I thought it was a very inclusive article you did on the naming rights. I mean, it's more than just talking about the naming rights. It's talking about what the vision is for the future for the Saints and Pelicans in terms of who they're going to select for naming rights as well.
Right. The Saints are looking for more engagement from the next, I guess, Superdome naming rights sponsor. They went in and won a hurricane responsive party and things like that to really engage with the community. As far as companies that I've heard bantered about, yeah, I've heard a few. You can look at just the development of New Orleans in general. If someone wanted to start delving in and doing their own research on maybe what kind of airlines and airplane equipment manufacturers were involved with the airport expansion, the other Fortune 500 companies that are involved around town. You can start to get your guesses, and then I've been around the team long enough that, and other reporters, that you hear a couple names.
Right.
Nothing that would be worth going live with now, but there are big companies in negotiations to come and sponsor and put their naming rights on the Superdome.
What does that look like in terms of from a monetary standpoint? Based on what Mercedes was willing to pay, and now the next time around, because again, the Superdome, Mercedes came at the right time when you talk about all the spotlight this building had on it with all the major events that were played there, and we're getting ready to get into another cycle of those major events again.
Right, you had all those major events. You had the team coming back from Katrina, but looking at the finances, it was only a 10-year deal for 50 to 60 million. Mercedes-Benz went and signed a 30-something year deal with Atlanta.
Yes.
I think our next deal here will be at least twice the amount of years and possibly 3 times the amount of money.
Wow. Let's head back to the phone lines to Bell Chase and Dwayne. Dwayne, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Dwayne.
I'd like to ask y'all guys, there's a rumor that the Pelicans were interested in trading for Brandon Beal. I'm going to hang up.
Okay.
And let's see what you guys say.
Thank you, Dwayne. Bradley Beal, I was reading about it today. Talk a little bit about they seem to have been flirting with the Bradley Beal trade for a long, long time. A lot of people think it may happen. Talk a little bit about that.
It's a bit of I guess a tango, a bit of musical chairs, because you've got some trades with Drew and Beal swapping spots, some trade offers out there with Beal coming here. They were both going to team up in LA. They've been flirting around that idea for a while, both the Pelicans and just Beal and Drew Holiday. Not that the players are getting together and conspiring about it,
yes,
but that's been the talk in NBA circles for 18 months now. Beal has been very adamant that he is steadfast in the Washington Wizards project. I don't think we'll see Bradley Beal move until John Wall is back and we see what John Wall has to offer.
Okay.
Just because Bill's been that diehard for the city. He was kind of like Drew, and Drew said,
yes,
I don't want to be traded. I would rather actually build something here. I think Bill sees that all the jumping around and teaming up, you can only do so much. Only one team's still going to win the championship.
Right.
And that there's more pride in building something organically. And until he can see what that team will do with John Wall and where they're going forward with all that new cap space and the new GM now that Ernie Grunfeld is gone. Bill is a hot commodity, but he is very cold on making a move.
Right. You recently did an article on Drew Holiday. Talk a bit about what you learned from about Drew Holiday that maybe you didn't know when you started to write the article.
Yeah, I had an article just come out today on Drew Holiday, loyalty, his value to the New Orleans Pelicans. And what I learned in talking to the fans was Drew Holiday might be more loved than, say, Alvin Kamara. I thought Alvin Kamara, when I first moved to New Orleans a year ago, he was the most beloved player in the city because he would ride a scooter around the CBD and wave. And talking to the fans, talking to Squad 6 members, people I'd seen on the dance cam, and I went and found them. That's how I started developing the article, was just talking to fans and staying in touch and getting with them on Twitter and just continuing that conversation. And the more the conversation around Drew evolved, the more you've seen the admiration for Drew, the love for Drew, just how much people want to see Drew succeed anywhere, but definitely in New Orleans.
Yeah. Interesting because, again, next year he has another year on the deal, and I think after that is the option year. So I'm interested to see, again, is he in the plans for the Pelicans long term? Do they move on from him? Even though they've made him, again, one of the face of the franchise. We know who the real face of the franchise is. It's Zion, at this point. And ultimately, again, what he garners on the open market. At the beginning of the season, I talked about it. You were never going to get more value for Drew Holiday than you were going to get then. And again, if he continues to play at a high level, that value will continue. It'll be interesting to see, again, how they kind of mesh this together. And does he want to continue and finish his career here in New Orleans?
Right, and I pointed out in the article, Drew and Zion work well together. Everybody wants to point out Zion and Lonzo and all these other, and our starters have this great efficiency rating. Just go to NBA.com and look at the advanced stats. I think they had 400 or 500 duos, tandems, that had played enough minutes to actually have a net rating. Drew Holiday and Zion Williamson were 37th in the league. Giannis Antetokounmpo was in 6 of the pairings above them. LeBron and Anthony Davis were in 8 of the pairings above them. So really, you're looking at a top 20 duo in the league if you're not going to, I guess, give Giannis and LeBron, credit for being above them twice.
Yes. It's going to look, I'll tell you what, between the draft picks, and a lot of it depends on the salary cap. And we know, again, this season will affect the salary cap going forward, hopefully not too much. But that was one of the reasons why they had to get more games in, because of the regional telecast and the money that kicks in there. But it'll be interesting to see, again, how this is going to play out. But David Griffin has done a terrific job so far, setting this team up, youth, and also, again, having veteran leadership, but then also stockpiling the draft picks for the ability to, again, continue to add as these veterans get a little bit older.
Right, and I'll say this, it may be a bit of a contrarian viewpoint, but I think not only did David Griffin knock the first year out of the park, he did that.
I agree.
My contention is his first year was always going to be his easiest because now he has to deal with the Ingram extension.
Yes.
Next year is Lonzo. Then he's got Drew. The hard part's coming. The easiest part was the first year cleaning house, draft Zion, and sit back on your laurel. He literally had to draft Zion, and he was going to have a great first year by most people's account. Now comes the hard part. Now is juggling the cap, because in 2 years' time, you're going to have people wanting to know, is Zion going to be traded? Is he going to get his max deal? How are you going to offer? That's coming up a lot quicker than most people realize. So this first year.
And I got to say, he'll get his max deal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's not, again, and I think that, and I got about 40 seconds. I also think Brandon Ingram will get a max deal this year. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree that the team should just walk up to him, fill in the blanks. How many years do you want? How many?
Right.
That's it.
Because again, to me, he has proven. And look, there was a lot of question marks with him coming here from Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, the blood clots, the health issues.
Right, everything. But I mean, he has proven again. He is a star in this league.
He is. He made his All-Star, and all the All-Stars and potential All-Stars the Pelicans have all make each other better. And that's another reason to keep them together.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Christopher Dodson, sorry we didn't get to the Saints today. We had so much Pelicans to be able to cover. We'll do that next time you come on the program. Before we get out of here, one more time, how can folks follow you on social media? How can they check out all your great articles?
Yeah, you can follow me on social media, Twitter. It's Doing It Dodson. We have the Protect the Nest at Protect_Nest podcast. It's a live and local podcast, but we can't really do that right now with the coronavirus. But we're still having a bunch of local sports people on, just trying to talk sports, and that's where you can keep up with me, the podcast, Twitter, and my Forbes articles. The archive is up there if you want to check them out.
Beautiful. Thanks for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. You can also catch us statewide, Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 o'clock every Friday night. That's Pelican Sports Network. You can catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2 in the iHeartRadio app. That is weekdays noon to 2. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes of this program can be seen at ericasher.com. You can also check out the WLAE-TV YouTube page, where, again, all of our episodes are there as well. We also post this on our social media platforms, usually on a Friday as well. I want to thank Christopher Dodson for joining us, also the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dodson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, my director, William Hill. And again, special thanks to the underwriters who make this show possible. Thanks to each and every one of them. Please support our underwriters. I'm Eric Asher for Christopher Dodson. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you right back here next week.